Welcome to another episode of the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico. You talk about the lackluster games coming up for college football. Those football fans out there will not be disappointed when we get to the NFL this week. I know we've had a couple weeks lately with some disappointing lineups with the games, but this coming week, I've got 4 games already highlighted that should be pretty significant when it comes to the playoff picture, because we've got Tennessee Titans and Pittsburgh Steelers playing each other. Titans sitting at 6-3, Steelers at 7-2. The Rams and Vikings, both 7-2, will be playing each other.
That's a great game.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see. I haven't really gotten to watch the Rams this year. I know I watched them earlier in the season against the Redskins, but that was the only time I've really gotten to see them play much. And they're a team I'm interested to be able to actually see, and especially against a good team like the Vikings that both at 7-2, both looking like very strong playoff contenders there. So that should be a great matchup as well.
For sure. You said you had 4. What other 2 ones are jumping out at you?
I've got the Falcons and Seahawks. Falcons sitting at 5-4, coming off a win against the Cowboys. Seahawks at 6-3. And then the Cowboys Eagles. That's going to be a significant one for Eagles maintaining their hold. No matter what, they're going to maintain their hold on the division. But to keep it that they're just keeping the Cowboys down there and the Cowboys to stay in that wild card race, this is going to be an important game for them to be able to maintain an over 500 record right now. And it's really going to hurt them if they drop down to 5-5. There's a lot of teams right around them there ready to take that wild card spot away.
Absolutely. I mean, and I look at 2 more games. I look at a game like Washington, New Orleans, that New Orleans has won 7 in a row. They're really competing. Washington they need to stop the bleeding. They've had a brutal schedule. Their opponent's winning percentage, if you take out San Francisco from their schedule, their opponent's winning percentage is 700. That's ridiculous. Wow. If you're a Redskins fan, you got to be just that's just unfortunate, really. I mean, that's just really unfortunate that the schedule worked out that way. And then 4 o'clock game, New England going to they're not going to Oakland. They're actually going down to Mexico City. This game's played in Mexico City. But let's see if Oakland can continue and try to save their season in pretty much another must-win situation for them as they take on the AFC leading New England Patriots. So, yeah, you're right, man. With the exception of a couple games, next week's NFL slate is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And it's great because our teams play at 8:30. So we have pretty much the entire day to check out scores, check out fantasy guys, and watch some great matchups. What about last week, though? What happened in the NFL in Week 10, Zach, that caught your attention right off the bat? My team didn't play. My team had a bye, so I was just kind of sitting back and taking everything in.
And we'll get to the Cowboys. We'll talk about them who did play this week, had a disappointing game there. But we'll start with the Seattle Seahawks game. They beat the Cardinals 22-16. They're still seeming very above average. They're barely beating a team with now a 4-5 record. The Cardinals, with their backup quarterback, have not been that great. I'm very intrigued. That's why I'm excited about that Seahawks-Falcons game, to see this Seahawks team tested against the Falcons. Haven't been that amazing, but against another playoff type team, to see if they can hold up, because both those teams have been similar. They've had their ups, they've had their downs. They're sitting just above average. I feel like that they could go either way to finish out the season, and they're very similar teams. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And also, I wanted to bring up the Seahawks uniforms. The color rush with their green, I think it is gross.
Yeah. See, I kind of like them. I'm not going to lie. I kind of like that green. I'm usually, there's a lot of color rush uniforms that I really don't like, but I kind of like that one for some reason. I don't know why. I kind of digged it. I don't know. I kind of liked it. So we're on opposite sides of the fashion the fashion train there.
Yeah, for sure. Disagreeing on that one. I am just that lime green is just too much.
Was it just too much? It was just too much.
Yeah, I like it in their normal uniforms where it's kind of an
It's
outline
subtle.
and it's
subtle.
muted. But to have it that entire I coached it for a basketball team that the girls team, I coached a boys team, but the girls team, they dressed them up like that. And I just always felt like they looked so ridiculous. Like lime green top, lime green bottoms. I think some of the team, they gave us the lime green socks too.
Nice.
But I think some of the teams got green shoes to go. So it was overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And one of the bigger stories to come out of this game, Zach, is Richard Sherman tears his Achilles tendon. He's now done for the season. That is a huge, huge hit. Obviously, I mean that kind of goes without saying for the Seattle Seahawks, for their defense, a unit that has been. I mean, I don't think this defense is the same as they were a handful of years ago. But still very, very good. And now, I mean, Richard Sherman, I mean, he pretty much locks down one side of the field and allows that defense to do so many things. That's not there anymore. So I'm wondering how big of a hit that's going to be for Seattle. But, hey, everything's okay because they signed Byron Maxwell to come back and play in that secondary. So I'm sure he'll come back and save the day and everything will be fine, right?
We'll see. He had success when he was there with Seattle. I know he's been disappointing other places. He played for Philly for a season. He played for Miami for a little bit there. So it'll be interesting to see if he can fill in and be an impact player there. He's going to have to get playing time right from the start in some form, whether he's a nickel corner or whether he actually earns that starting spot. Because that really hurts, losing Richard Sherman, who's one of the best at what he does there at the corner position.
Yeah, and look, Seattle just continues to kind of it seems like they just go through the motions, man. Russell Wilson just continues to – I mean, if Russell Wilson doesn't make plays and Russell Wilson doesn't have a Russell Wilson-type game, this team loses. And Russell Wilson was able to do kind of his Houdini act and had that big play down the sideline to Doug Baldwin, and that was ultimately the game changer there. They scored – one or two plays later and they pull away. But, I mean, to go into Arizona against Drew Stanton and the Cardinals, who really don't have much, I mean, really, and to have to really struggle to pull this game out, Seattle, to me, just – I still can't pull the trigger on them. Like, I can't – like, I'll be honest, I don't worry – I think – and I believe I said this last week. I just don't worry about Seattle that much right now. And now, especially with Sherman going, like, that's just another reason for me not to buy into them. I do not currently buy into Seattle. I don't think this is a sustainable way to win football games, what they're doing. Having, Russell Wilson to lead the team in rushing and run around back there and make plays miraculously. That's not sustainable. Eventually, the clock's going to strike midnight, and your carriage is going to turn back into a pumpkin and all that good stuff, and the fairy tale is going to be over. And that's what I think is going to happen to the Seahawks.
I'm very similar. I feel like I have a little bit better of a view of them than you do, but I'm still very concerned about that running game. I love Doug Baldwin, love Jimmy Graham. They just make plays for this team. Same thing with Russell Wilson, but they haven't gotten anything from what seems like the hundreds of running backs they've tried out this year that they just put through and don't have success, and they try somebody else, and they haven't gotten anything from that running game. And there's no way against competitive teams that they can continue like that and continually have success, a.k.a. the playoffs, when every game is going to be against a tough team, and there's going to be teams they can hold down their passing game, hold down Russell Wilson, and what do they have then? They have nothing.
Or, Zach, how about the rest of the season for that matter? I mean, you take on Atlanta this weekend, like you mentioned. Then you have to go to San Francisco, a team you only beat by 3 at home. You play the Eagles, then you play Jacksonville, who's playing very well. That defense is a very ball-hawking defense. The Rams, who everyone knows their story. You got to go at Dallas. At that point, Zeke will be back, and then you finish with the Cardinals. So I mean, getting to the playoffs is, I don't think, a I mean, a certainty. It probably is, but with that schedule, I mean, that's a pretty that's a tall task right there. They're fortunate, that Russell Wilson is kind of playing at the high level that he is, but it's going to be interesting to see how things finish for the Seahawks.
It definitely will be. The thing that makes me feel better about them making the playoffs is a just weird combination of teams trying to battle for that spot, with the best one seeming to be the Cowboys, but the Falcons are also there. And then the Lions and the Packers, who I feel like are, even though they have the same record as those other two, I feel like they're definitely a step down. And the Packers a couple steps down without Aaron Rodgers.
Well, this game this weekend's huge because the team directly behind the Seahawks for that sixth and final playoff spot is the Falcons. And if the Falcons win, both these teams will have a 6-4 record, but the Falcons will hold the head-to-head tiebreaker then. So, I mean, Monday night is a huge game in the grand scheme of things for the Seahawks.
It's very true. We'll move to our next game here, and this is one I feel like we made a great call last week. We saw the Bills sitting at 5-3 and eliminated them from the playoffs, even with their winning record. And they come out and prove us right with a 47-10 loss. Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram just dominated this game. Didn't give a chance. And Michael Thomas as well. He had over 100 yards receiving. Just no shot at all. And if you listen to the preview episode heading into the season, we talked about Nathan Peterman possibly getting a chance for Buffalo because of some of the suspect quarterback play from Tyrod Taylor. He got some action this week and actually did decently with it. Obviously, it was towards the end of the game, but he went 7 for 10, threw a touchdown, and now it's out there that we'll see if he's able to get more playing time or even get some starts here as we see the Bills continuing to drop off.
Yeah, we said last week this was a huge game for them to see kind of what they were made of, and they're not made of much because to perform that way at home after a few extra days off after the Thursday night game, I mean, that's pathetic. I mean, you go up 3-0 and then you let the Saints score 47 unanswered points. I mean, I'd love to know what the record is for most unanswered points in an NFL football game. I mean, that's got to be up there. I mean, 47. I mean, that's got to be close. I mean, really. I mean, 40. I mean, you let a team score 47 unanswered. They almost hang a 50 burger on you. I mean, that's pathetic. And they do it by just running the ball down your throat. I mean, Drew Brees didn't have a passing touchdown in that game. They had 6 rushing touchdowns as a team. The Bills should be embarrassed, and their season, like you said, Zach, is done. But the Saints, they keep marching in, and they've won 7 in a row, and they look like the real deal. They're doing it with defense, and they're doing it running the football. I'm not sure who would have thought that, but yeah.
The turnaround from their defense has been very impressive. From as terrible as they've been the last many years, and now they're not among the top in the league or anything, but they're very solid and exactly what this team needs because of their high-powered offense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you know, I'm interested to see how things kind of go down the stretch for the Saints because, look, you win 7 games in a row in the NFL, obviously you're doing something right, and I don't want to take anything away from you, but I'm curious to see kind of how things play out because it looks like this team's obviously going to get into the playoffs one way or the other, whether it's winning the division or getting into a wild card. I'm interested to see how that defense performs later in the year and into the playoffs because they, outside of the first 2 games of the season, excuse me, they haven't played that great of offenses. I mean, they played the likes of Green Bay without Aaron Rodgers, Chicago, we know about them, Tampa, their offense has been a mess all year. Jameis Winston's been hurt. Buffalo on Sunday, not very good. Miami, they're a train wreck. And then Detroit, a team that is a pretty solid offensive team, they gave up 38 points to. So I think this is a little bit of a mirage as far as the defensive side of the football goes. What they're doing offensively, I'm not going to take anything away from because you're running the ball consistently. You still got Drew Brees back there. He's completing 70% of his passes, which is ridiculous. I think the defensive side of the ball right now, I think it's a little bit of mirage. And I think as we go later into the season, we're going to see that kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, that's a good point there. That's something I didn't look into, the offensives they've been up against. But that's something we could see, that they start to break down a little bit. But as of right now, they're on that 7-game winning streak. They're looking good. They're looking very impressive. I know I have 2 fantasy teams right now that I'm starting Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara every week. And I love it. It's been working out for me.
You got to keep doing it, man. I mean, the Saints are a running team. I can't believe I'm saying that. Who would have thought? But, yeah, it's paying off. And it's funny, the one league that I have Mark Ingram in, since this little run he's been on and the Saints have been on, I've been consistently winning now. It's crazy.
I love him. I have him on I'm in 4 different leagues. I have him in every single league. I just felt like he was such a value going into this season that I could never turn him down. And I have absolutely loved having him on my team.
That's awesome. Great find there. Great pick there.
Definitely. So we'll move from there to the Tennessee Titans barely pulling out a win. They win 24-20 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals dropped to 3-6. Titans are sitting pretty nice right now at 6-3. They're right at the top of their division, the AFC South, with Jacksonville, who's also 6-3. So this is a team that, if they continue winning, I know it's not pretty here, barely beating a lower end team, but they're in the driver's seat to make it to the playoffs here. So it'll be interesting to see. They're getting contribution from both running backs. Derrick Henry produced a lot better. DeMarco Murray, very inefficient, but did score 2 touchdowns there on the ground. Marcus Mariota continues to be solid, not anything spectacular. They're having him throw it a lot. He threw it 44 times this game. And on the other side, the Bengals threw it 35 times with Andy Dalton. He was solid. Again, nothing outstanding. 265 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their top running back is easily Joe Mixon, but every week I feel like we bring this up, that he barely gets any carries. He led them in carries with only 9. He averaged 4.1 yards per carry. He scored a touchdown, but they're just not feeding him the ball, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
They're just a poorly coached team. They have been for years, but for some reason that organization, like Marvin Lewis, he's got to have pictures of somebody in that organization. Like he's got to have he's got to have blackmail on someone. I mean, for him to continue to have a job, it's mind blowing. I mean, in a close game like this. I mean, look, if you would have said Joe Mixon only had 9 carries, but they lost 47-14, all right, I get that. You need to throw the ball to try to come back. Okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But in a close game that went down to the end, the very end, the final minutes, and Joe Mixon has 9 carries when he's averaging 4 yards a crack on those 9 carries. I mean, give the poor kid the ball. I mean, he's clearly a playmaker. So Cincinnati, they are what they are. They're just a debacle. And Tennessee, I mean, you talk about one of the more mysterious teams in the league. It's Tennessee. I mean, I can't figure this team out. I mean, they play down the competition against the Browns and the Bengals, yet they beat Seattle earlier in the year. So it's like, I don't know which team they are. They're a beneficiary of a pretty easy division. That obviously helps. But if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure this is the team we said last week that this has the makings of a get into the playoffs and lose the first game anyway. So
right. And part of the big thing that contributes to that is they have a lot of key players that are still very, very young. They're still developing. You look at Derrick Henry, like I mentioned, he's in, I believe, his 3rd season. Marcus Mariota, he's still very young. I want to say he's 23. They have draft picks from this year. Corey Davis, Taywan Taylor getting a lot of playing time for him. The number one vet they constantly lean on is Delaney Walker, who led them in receiving yardage this past year, or this past game, with 63. And it's good they have that, but it's a very young team. It's an up-and-coming team, but they're not there yet. Like you said, and like we've talked about before, a team I expect to make the playoffs and not be able to win a game.
For sure. Absolutely.
From that point, we'll go to what was way closer of a game than it should have been and then anticipated and everything else. This is the Steelers pulling out a 20-17 win against the 3-win Colts team. They were down at one point 17-3 after a Chester Rogers touchdown for the Colts, and they were able to come back. Juju Smith-Schuster has been way better than I expected him to be in the NFL, especially early on as a rookie. He had 97 yards and touchdown. This game, another good game for him, which he was an important part of that. He got their first touchdown to start that comeback, and then they were able to tie it at 17 and then kick a field goal with no time left to finally win it. A lot of teams, we hit this with a lot of teams that just, they are not that impressive, even though they're at the top of their division or the top of their conference. This is a 7-2 team. They look like one of the better teams in the AFC, but then they have games like this that they look like they're barely better than a bad team starting a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what to make of this game. I guess it's just one of them clunker games that, you expect to go in and dismantle the Colts. And, a lot of people, myself included, expected Roethlisberger to kind of have a get-right game against a Indy defense that's just not very good, down both cornerbacks from the beginning of the year. And you expect them to have a good game. He had an okay game, 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, but I was expecting way more. I was also expecting a lot more from Antonio Brown, who only had 3 receptions for 47 yards. I just think Juju Smith-Schuster, who I agree with you, Zach, I didn't expect this kind of stuff from him. I loved him at USC, and I loved him in high school. I remember when he came out of high school, he was Juju Smith. He didn't later add Schuster to the name till his final year at Southern Cal, but I think he's a beneficiary of a lot of playmakers on that team, and he's kind of the guy that teams kind of forget about, and he's continuing to make plays. But you see this a lot from the Steelers year after year. They kind of have these clunker games, but yet they always find a way to pull them out and win. They win, but they don't cover. That's what me and my friends always joke about. But, not much to say on this game. I'm still a little on edge with the Steelers. Think they're a very good team, don't get me wrong, but if it came down to the Steelers or the Patriots, I'm taking the Patriots right now.
I have no question about that. I think the Patriots have definitely looked better throughout this season. Although the Steelers consistently, their defense has been better than what it's been for them the last couple of years. Since Troy Polamalu retired, pretty much, that it's kind of dropped off. But it's been a little bit better this year. Every time I watch them, I seem to get that feel. And they have the playmakers. They have these, whether it's the away games that they always seem to choke on, whether it's just kind of the nature of their team that they always seem to be very up and down. They have what it takes to be a good team. It's just a question of if they'll show up and put it on the field.
Absolutely. Yep.
So we'll go to one more 3-point win here, or one more one-score win against the 3-win team, where Jacksonville pulls out the overtime victory against the Chargers. This is a Chargers team. They've had some hope, but just continue to be disappointing. The Jaguars, they've been solid this year. They don't stand out to me, but their record they're 6-3. They're, like I mentioned earlier, they're tied with Tennessee there at the top of their division. Both of those teams are 6-3. They have some good young pieces. They're another team that I see being similar to Tennessee, that they're young. They could make the playoffs, but I'd expect them to get beat first round, although that'd be a great step for them. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward, but yet another game that if they're a true playoff team, if they're a true competitor, they should win a game against the 3-win team by more than a field goal in overtime.
Yeah, this is interesting because the Chargers were actually playing well, coming into this game and playing pretty decent. And the Jaguars were the number 1 pass defense in the league, and And Rivers struggled from, majority of the first half and kind of got it together a little bit in the second half, throwing those 2 touchdowns. But they couldn't really get the running game going either, to the Chargers I'm talking about. The Jaguars, on the other hand, I'm not sure what the coaching staff was thinking coming into this game. At no time is allowing Blake Bortles to throw the ball 51 times ever a good thing. Like, that's never something you want to do. That's never a recipe for success. They're fortunate that the Chargers are masterminds at finding ways to lose football games that teams ultimately just hand them on a silver platter. And the Chargers just create ways to lose football games. It's really just kind of humorous at this point. But Blake Bortles throwing 51 times is ridiculous. That's part of the reason why I think that they were in the situation where they probably should have lost. But hey, tip your hat to them. They find a way to win, barely win. I don't know if you saw the game-winning field goal in overtime, Zach. I was actually watching it live when it happened. Guy actually shot the gap and got a finger on it, but the ball actually just barely made it over the crossbar. And what's funny, getting back to the Chargers finding ways to lose, they actually had a penalty the play before that moved the kick up 5 yards. If that kick is back 5 more yards without that penalty, that ball probably doesn't get over the crossbar, and the Chargers are still alive and have the chance to go down and win the game. That's what the Chargers do. They find ways to lose football games. So really pathetic.
Yeah, they always seem like they have good pieces, specifically on offense, and the Chargers just, like you said, they are incredible at finding ways to lose, and that's just what they've done all season. From the beginning of the season, when they had those 3 straight games, they lost by whatever it was, like a total of 6 points, or it was something absurd there. The first couple weeks of the season, that just all these close games, they were losing every single one. From there, we'll go to the game that I actually watched the most of this past weekend, which was the Vikings and Redskins. Vikings won 38-30. It was not as close as that final score would suggest. The Redskins made a little run there in the fourth quarter to make it closer after it was 35-20 there in the third quarter. The one thing I wrote down that really stood out, before I get to that, actually, Adam Thielen just dominated this game. The Redskins had no answer for him. He just always seemed to either be open or just be able to create that slight opening where not a lot of yards after the catch, but he was very good at just kind of making that cut, whether it was, I remember one specific that he kind of got behind the linebacker, cut up field, and he was there for the catch, immediately got tackled, but it was a very smart play to open himself up. And it just seemed like that throughout the game. He was able to open himself up. He had 166 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 78 yards and a touchdown. The Redskins just had no answer for those guys. And on the Redskins side, I know one guy both of us liked going into this season. He did statistically still have a decent game. Jamison Crowder had 4 catches, 76 yards. He repeatedly continued to drop the ball, including one towards the end of the game in the end zone where they had to settle for a field goal. I was amazed. I watched him have at least 2 drops for sure. I'm pretty sure there was a third one in there. He had 11 targets, only caught those 4. But one thing I said I was going to bring up earlier, towards the end of the game, like I said, 35-20, Vikings were winning. Redskins brought it back. They kicked a field goal to make it 27-38, and then they kicked another field goal from 55 yards out. Very impressive field goal. It had distance to be even farther to make it 38-30. There's a minute 14 left. Redskins had no timeouts. They had to rely on the onside kick. The onside kick did not even make it 5 yards. It's got to go 10, and it didn't even make it 5 yards and went straight out of bounds. It was one of the silliest onside kicks I've ever seen in my life.
Terrible. Couldn't even give his team a chance. It just, from the kick, it didn't have an opportunity. I saw that. That was That was really pathetic. And
It
yeah,
was.
this game was interesting because, you know, the Vikings, who a lot of people, label as a defensive team, the defense wasn't as good as it had been previously, but the offense came to play. And I think that's a sign of a good team is when, one part of your team has a down day, the other part picks you up. And I definitely label the Vikings as a good team. I mean, I know their quarterback situation is a little murky, and who knows what they're going to do going forward with Bridgewater being available now. But that's still impressive to me. And the Redskins, I've seen people talk about the Redskins being as like a good team and this and that. I'm sorry, but I just don't really see it. Josh Norman continues to prove my point of being one of the more overrated players in the NFL. I mean, he got murdered on Sunday. He played really bad on Sunday. I've just never been a big Josh Norman fan. I think he gets a lot of love for that one good year he had in Carolina, and he got a big payday in Washington. But I tip my hat to Minnesota with the way that they were able to win by putting up a boatload of points. And Case Keenum has a really good day against the Redskins.
And the Redskins are the team I've gotten to watch a lot this year because here in the DC area, they're always on TV. That's why I said this was the one I watched the most. And they're very up and down. They do exactly what I was explaining a lot. They kind of get down, they make a comeback, they make it look good, and then they find some way to not quite get there or to blow it at the end. And they're just not there yet. They've still got a lot of holes, especially at running back, and they lost another one. Rob Kelly's out for the season now, unfortunately for them. But, I mean, he wasn't that effective for him anyway. I think he had 2 touchdowns the past week before this. But still, even when he's had games like that, very little yards per carry. Samaje Perine is going to get some more playing time now. He's basically the exact same person, an inefficient runner that you kind of hope for a touchdown with. Chris Thompson's very impressive. Every time I see them play, I think he's the best player on their team. He's just he does everything for him. He gets some yardage on the ground. He has great hands there, catching it in the air. He just continues to be very reliable, even though, especially this week, his stats didn't look incredible or anything like that. But they have a lot of missing pieces. They're just not there at this point. From that game, we'll go to our last game we'll really dive in depth here on, which was the Falcons' beatdown of the Dallas Cowboys, 27-7. Cowboys got out to an early start with a touchdown to go up 7-0. And then the Falcons just kind of took over from that point, 27 straight points to finish it out. They really handled the Cowboys. It was something where Devonta Freeman, he didn't get to do much there. He got hurt during the game, 2 rushes for 3 yards. But Tevin Coleman, they have a great setup there at running back. He was able to come in, have 83 yards rushing, score a touchdown there. Like I expected, and like we talked about a couple weeks ago when it was thought that Ezekiel Elliott would be suspended before this, they got a lot of action to Jason Witten. He was kind of more so a short yardage player for him. He had 7 receptions, 59 yards there. He was the biggest difference. Alfred Morris actually not bad as a fill-in for Zeke. He had 53 yards on the ground, but still they got dominated there, especially their line. They got torn apart there. Dak Prescott had a hard time really getting off much of anything throughout the game. Although he didn't have a terrible stat line. He didn't throw any interceptions, but just wasn't getting the yardage like he normally does. Only threw for 176 yards, even though he had 30 attempts. And a solid game by Matt Ryan. Threw for over 75% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, threw 1 interception, but just a very solid handling of the Cowboys by this Falcons team that's had its ups and downs, and especially downs throughout this season. But this has them at 5-4. sitting right there in the playoff picture, and we'll see if they can make a little run here. They've got a big game coming up against Seattle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they kind of set themselves up to kind of control things here going forward the next few weeks with, getting a big win against Dallas, like you said, Seattle coming in, or them going to Seattle, I should say, next weekend, primetime stage. So, yeah, that's a big win for Atlanta. And I didn't think they would look. I wasn't sure what to think of this game. I didn't think Atlanta would win in the way that they did. I didn't think that the defense was going to shut down the Cowboys offense the way that it did. Outside of that touchdown drive where Prescott runs it in for the touchdown, their offense was lost. I mean, absolutely lost. I mean, they couldn't really run the ball. They did okay early, then they fell behind, so they had to throw the ball more. And the offensive line was, bad. And the coaching was bad too. I mean, the backup tackle that's filling in for Tyron Smith, he's getting burned, and they just refused to give him help. It reminded me of the Winston Justice game years ago when, he fills in for Jason Peters on the left side and against the Giants on Sunday Night Football, and he's just getting killed. I think O.C. Umenyiora, I think it was a similar game as this. I think he had like 5 or 6 sacks that night, and they just refused to give Winston Justice help. And same situation here, refused to give the poor guy help, and you saw what happened. That's what's going to happen if you don't give the guy help. And that wasn't just him too. The whole offensive line played a really bad game, and they're going to really need to step up this week against the Eagles defensive line. But and no Sean Lee now, he's hurt. Things really starting to snowball for the Cowboys, and it doesn't look good. I just think it's funny because there's people out there that think that Dak Prescott's the most valuable player on the Cowboys offense, and I for one don't think that's true. I think it's Ezekiel Elliott, and I think this game proved that. I think this game really proved that Zeke is what makes the offense go. If you don't have to respect or fear, we'll use the word fear. If you don't have to fear Dallas's running game and fear the running back that is behind Dak Prescott, it makes things so much more difficult, or so much difficult for the Cowboys, so much easier for that defense. And that's kind of what you saw on Sunday. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see going forward with the Cowboys. They're going to have to figure out that offensive line issue and, maybe keep Witten in the block more. I'm not sure, but they're going to need to figure it out because they can't afford to keep losing these games.
Yeah, they're in a tough position there, not sitting highly up the standings. So they've got to make some adjustments. And this next slate of games without Zeke Elliott are very important to them and their playoff standings here. So hopefully they can make some adjustments and make a little run. But I'm definitely feeling down after that game.
Yeah, you got to be. You have to be, really. You go from a big high last weekend, 2 weekends ago against the Chiefs, to this game against the Falcons. That's because that was just a bad game start to finish. So, as an Eagles fan, I loved it personally, but I see where you're coming from, man. So I don't have too many hard feelings for you.
Yeah, I got you. From that one, we're gonna move to a game. I'm gonna move pretty quickly through the rest, so pick up anything that you want to add in. The
Sure.
next game I'm pretty bitter about right now. I lost 3 fantasy matchups this week because of this game alone, where I had big leads, and Cam Newton comes through, throws 4 touchdowns, rushes for 95 yards, and just I don't know how it happened that I had 3 of my 4 leagues I'm playing Cam Newton, and
That's
3
weird.
of my 4 leagues he made a comeback win. 2 of those leagues I lost by less than 2 points. Man. But respect to Cam Newton for a monster game.
Yeah, good Cam Newton showed up last night. He's very up and down as Cam Newton. And like I said, good Cam Newton showed up last night. Well, great Cam Newton showed up. 4 touchdowns. 96 yards rushing, had the big 68-yard run. Miami, they're an absolute joke. Pretty clear that it's good that good to see the team got the message with trading Jay Ajayi. What a dumb move that was. Still can't get over that. But yeah,
Yeah, they had
the Panthers. I like the Panthers defense. I'll tell you that. The Panthers defense going forward is going to continue to give a lot of people fits.
the Dolphins had some success with Kenyon Drake. He had 82 yards and a touchdown, but 66 of those yards came on one carry. So little asterisk by those stats. But we'll see with Jay Ajayi how he does with the Eagles. He's supposed to get some more carries coming up here. But I basically see it as Miami was just selling out of this season and didn't see the hope, and they look like it in this game, losing by 24 here. So we'll move quickly through a couple more blowouts / not close games.
It's safe to say real quick. It's safe to say that the Dolphins probably aren't going to have many primetime games next year. They've coming off back-to-back primetime games. Got shellacked last night by the Panthers. Last week they lost in a rout basically against the Raiders, a game that the final score was closer than the game was. And then I'm pretty sure they were in primetime earlier this year as well. Again, I can't remember the
that
game.
Ravens game. Those
Thank you. The Ravens game. Yes, that was an absolute shit show. So safe to say they're not going to get probably any primetime games next year. I hope not.
I'm perfectly okay with that. They don't look very worth watching. So New England handled business. They won 41-16 against Denver. Clear domination there. New England's now 7-2. Denver's 3-6. And then the Rams 33-7. They beat Houston, starting their backup quarterback there. Rams also moved to 7-2. Houston drops to 3-6. And the third of the blowout games, Detroit 38-24 win over Cleveland. It was a close game until Detroit scored 14 points there in the fourth quarter to really pull ahead. But Detroit's now 5-4. They're very clearly in the playoff picture. Cleveland's 0-9. They're very clearly in the picture for the number 1 overall pick. So anything from you on those 3 games at all?
Not really. The only thing I would say is, boy, Denver is really falling off, and
I can't believe how bad.
I thought they'd struggle this year. I didn't think they'd be struggling for the reasons why they're struggling. And the last 2 weeks, it's been the defense that has really let them down, and I'm not sure what the hell's going on. And I mean, they're just one hell of a fall from grace for that team and that defense, especially. So they really need to figure things out because they're starting to lose some hope there. But until they get a quarterback, it's just like any other team in this league. Until you get a quarterback, you're gonna be running uphill.
Yeah, that definitely makes it tougher for them. But both sides of the ball, and early in the season when they were doing well, C.J. Anderson was one of the league-leading rushers, and he just hasn't been the same since the first, I think, 4 or 5 games there. So after that, we'll congratulate Green Bay on their first victory without Aaron Rodgers. They're still hanging around with a winning record. I continue to expect that to drop with Brett Hundley at quarterback. They're now 5-4. Bears dropped to 3-6. And Jets lost to Tampa Bay 15-10. Also, both of those teams not very exciting. Tampa's 3-6. Jets are 4-6. And then last one is the 49ers. Congratulations on picking up their first win, 31-21 over the 1-8 Giants. So a couple terrible teams there this year. Any comments you want to make on all those losing teams?
The only thing that I'll say is, look, I know the Browns don't have a win. I know the 49ers just got a win. I truly believe that as we sit right now, the New York Giants are the worst team in football. I truly believe that. I think, I mean, you saw the Niners get a win. They beat them. You saw the Browns put up one hell of a fight against the Lions, almost pull that one out. It's a shame they couldn't get it figured out in the fourth quarter. But I think the Giants are the worst team in football. It's gotten really bad in New York.
I feel like they can still hang some hope on, because I feel like some teams like the Browns, there's just not much to build around there. They might have some pieces on defense. The 49ers, there's again not much to build around. I think Carlos Hyde is likely to leave in free agency. They just don't have many pieces that really stand out. I know they just traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, so hopefully for them, that can be something that's effective moving forward. But the Giants, I like some of their young pieces with Sterling Shepard, who had a big game. Odell Beckham's been hurt, but he'll be back next year. Evan Ingram has had a great season there at the tight end. So they have some young pieces to build around, and I like that for them moving forward. But yeah, their defense has been miserable and incredibly burnable throughout the year, no matter who's there at cornerback, it seems. I know they got Janoris Jenkins back this week, and he got burned for a couple touchdowns, including an 83-yarder to Marquise Goodwin. They're not a good team at all this year, but I do like some of their pieces they have there.
Sure, absolutely. I totally get where you're coming from.
So we already covered earlier some of the games coming up this next week, week 11. So a quick run through again on the ones I had. Tennessee and Pittsburgh play. Rams and Vikings will play. Falcons and Seahawks, and then Eagles and Cowboys. Some of those games that really stand out coming up here for the next week, which is week 11. And then I know you added a couple games to that. Do you remember what those were?
Yeah, just Washington at New Orleans at 1 o'clock, and then New England at Oakland, which is actually in Mexico City. That's a 4:25 kickoff. So yeah, a lot of good matchups next week, or this week, I should say. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. So we got those on coming up Sunday and Monday, and then we've got Thanksgiving next Thursday, so we'll have some games going on there. So it's a good little run, obviously the next week after that. And so it's a good little run here for the NFL, even for some of you college guys, like we talked about that in the episode, in the college episode of it's kind of a down slate of games for college football this week. But this should be an enjoyable stretch here in the NFL. Some good games coming up. Some playoff pictures kind of coming into shape here. Teams moving up. Teams really establishing themselves. So it's exciting times in the NFL.
I love it. I love it, Zach. Absolutely love it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback as we continue to build this platform with our podcast. It's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.